Hey everyone, BT here. We are going into Do You Have What It Takes? And on this episode, David is going back into his early years of what he did to get to where he is today. You definitely don't want to miss it. Hey everyone, this is BT and welcome to Inside the Episode. Today, David and I are going inside the episode titled, Do You Have What It Takes? And we are back in the studio, rocking it out. So grateful to be here. David, welcome back.
Thank you.
So
glad
good.
to be here.
Yeah, glad to be here back in the TSM studio. In our digs, we dig it. We are practicing social distancing, by the way. All right, so in this episode, Do You Have What It Takes? We're talking about drive, and we're talking about, in the episode you mentioned, looking back at your past to see what indicators, whether or not you had the drive or if you didn't have the drive. And it got me thinking when you said that about where I used to stop as a kid. And when I was first starting out and I would struggle with something, I'd get up to that point and I would pull back. So I guess what I would like to see, if you could expand on a little bit, is what did you see when you were first starting out in your business and what you looked at as far as your drive and how you applied that drive to move you out of that?
Well, that was a big part of the problem. So when I started to wake up to the fact that I had created a damn mess, because I created all this responsibility without any education or skill sets to pack it up, I really looked really hard at like, what didn't I do right? Well, what decisions did I make wrong? And I could not get past this idea that I couldn't get myself to do the things. That it wasn't that I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was in school. I went through school like everybody else. I just could not get myself to apply myself at any decent level whatsoever. And it showed up with other things in my life too. Like if I didn't want to do it, I was just not there. Like it was mentally just not there. I just couldn't get myself to follow through on it. And that scared me because I was like, how can I ever find something that I really want to do and then be able to do it if I can't get myself to do it? So I started off with this idea of, that's when my attitude changed. Like every day I'm going to give it my best. Act like I love what I do, treat everybody with total respect. And I was 100% committed every day. Do it. The more I did it, of course, the easier it got. However, I was looking kind of in the rearview mirror at my life without ever really having experienced having gotten myself to do something. But here's where this began to change for me. Not only was I able to get myself to do it, but there was also a fear that kicked in. So I got fear motivated for a while. My life got so bad that I was afraid if it got any worse, we were going to end up out on the street, like my whole family, right? So it was kind of like, okay, you can't let that happen. So it doesn't matter whether you like this or not. You need to get moving, and that worked for a while. But as far as like how do you move forward with it, I couldn't wrap my mind around it. And I was listening to really, really early Tony Robbins tapes. This is way back in the early 90s. And I remember, and I'm pretty sure it was Tony that said this. I could be wrong. I might have heard it somewhere else, but I think it was Tony. That we all have experiences in our life that show us that we have the ability to be successful, but we don't really think about those things as showing us to be successful. So when I heard that, I started thinking to myself, well, wait a minute. Has there ever been a time in my life where I did follow through? I was able to do it. I didn't have to get myself to do it. I just did it because I wanted to. And of course there were. But I associated those things more with having fun. Like, I loved to go fishing. It didn't, I was always full of energy. I was up at, 4:30 a.m. to go with my dad to go fishing, whatever. And it wasn't difficult to get out of bed. It wasn't difficult to prepare. It wasn't difficult to read the maps and get your tackle ready and all this stuff. And I thought, well, that's interesting, right? So if I could find something in life where I felt that driven to do something, maybe I could actually pull it off and it wouldn't have to be this drudgery of every day, got to get out of bed,
sure,
and blah, blah, blah. So I realized that I was looking in my rearview mirror at what I had not experienced, never took into consideration there were several things that I did experience. Like I always talk about how bad I was in school, but I wasn't bad at science. I used to get straight A's in science. I would get D's and F's and everything else, but I loved science. and I would retain what I read, and I actually got to co-teach some classes in like 7th grade in high school. So I was actually good at that, and it came very easy to me. Other things, I could read the book forever and nothing would go in. Like, I don't know, was it a history book? I don't even remember, right? So, I think that in my experience of working with people, very much a person is looking at what did not motivate them, what they were not excited about, what they had to do that they didn't want to do, and saying, I don't have the drive. But they've never even looked at something that they do like to do and recognize that there's a different energy that comes with that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where I was then.
Yeah, and it makes me think of all the people out there that the drudgery. You said drudgery in that, and the people that are getting up and I hate going to work, and it's the hump day on Wednesday, and the thank God it's Friday, and all these things you've mentioned on this podcast before, and it really makes you wonder why they stay. And I'm assuming the answer to that is just safety and security, because they don't feel like they could do anything else, or maybe they do feel like it, but they're so afraid and tied to that paycheck, even though they're sacrificing their life for it. They would much rather do that than take a risk and bet on themselves, because then the work's on them.
All you have in your mind is what everybody told you to be scared of as far as success, what to do in order to be safe. You generally don't have any references of taking these big risks and actually making anything like that work. So it makes common sense. Why would you do it? There's nothing internally to reference the fact that you could, you should, you can. It's all the opposite. And then, of course, everybody that you admire in your life basically told you, don't do this.
Right.
Here's all the things that are wrong with that. Don't go down that road. So you don't think about that, and you stay very much stuck, even though there's a little spark inside that says you could do something different. There is something else out there. You could do something different. There's so much noise going on in the head that it's like, forget it.
Yeah, and the world's like littered with people like that they could have done something more than they're currently doing, but because they were told that they couldn't do that or shouldn't do that, they stayed where they're at. And, maybe they're probably a success in what they're doing, but there's a part of them that at the end of their life, they're going to look back and be like, oh, man, I wish I would have gone on and tried this thing.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about the process, because I think that's where this drive and determination comes from. You mentioned that many people focus on the destination and they neglect the journey, or what we're calling the process to get there. They want the result without putting in the due work. They don't realize the destination is constantly changing. And I believe in the episode you even said that the destination is there's no truth to the destination. Right. It's not like we're driving from here to there. That's our destination. This is a figurative destination that you'll never reach because it's not a thing, which means it's a moving target, basically. How can a person from a mindset shift or a successful mind shift begin to celebrate that process more and realize that those results will be an organic interpretation of that drive and desire they put into it?
I think a person has to look at success as a quality of life, right? And so because as you're saying it, I'm thinking to myself, okay, if it's not a destination, what is it? And that's what came to me. It's a quality of life.
I love that.
So if I say, I'm going to try to be successful every day in who I am and what I do, I'm raising the quality of my life. My standard of living, it gets better that day, not a year from now or 5 years from now when I hit a specific goal. It starts to get better right there.
Yes.
So I think the reason that we look at this elusive destination, so to speak, let's just say a lot of money, because we're very unhappy right now. I hear people say all the time, how do I stop worrying about money? I just want to get to the place where I don't have to worry about money anymore. There's no logic to that at all. They're absolutely not thinking. So they create this fantasy about what it must be like to live successfully. You don't have to worry about anything. You've got all the money you could ever spend. You're famous, on and on and on. Whatever it is, great friends. You get to do, trips, boats and planes and, all that stuff. So, but, like I said, even if you do get to the place where you get those things, you have to maintain those things or they'll be gone tomorrow. So that, if you're coming from the maturity level you are now and somebody was to give you all that, like a lottery winner, generally it's gone because you don't have what it takes to maintain it, right? It won't stay. It'll go away. So I think it's a quality of life. If I really look at why I'm attracted to success in the fantasy in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, it presents something there about life that I'm attracted to that I don't have now. However, I can start changing that right now. And if I change that right now, I'm now enjoying my life differently now. And I'm setting up the maturity, I'm setting up the work ethic, I'm setting up the mental muscle, all the discipline, everything that I need so that when I get to that place, I can maintain it and keep moving forward. So I think it's a quality of life. How do you want to live your life? You're going to live it at a completely different standard. But that also means you have to be willing to let go of all the creature comforts that are built into our mind as the way life should be if you're middle class or if you're blue collar or working class or whatever it is. The traditions that give us this illusion of stability and comfort in those levels. And you have to be willing to let those go because now you have to live at a different level, which is like, it's an achievement level. I'm going to do things different every day. I'm going to work on making my better best in almost every area of my life, if not every area.
And more often than not, that includes people. Like you're leaving people behind.
100%.
You have to. Yeah. And that brings me to my next piece where, you said you have to hang around driven people.
You do.
You said you see people get lit up by an idea. They quickly become overwhelmed by something. And then inevitably they discard it for the next thing. And that's a cycle that they keep perpetuating. Unbeknownst to them, what they're doing is they're just setting themselves up for failure after failure after failure because they're training their muscle to just, I got to that. I was excited. I was ready to do it. And then I'm not going to do it anymore. What comes to mind for me is like yo-yo dieting or New Year's resolutions. Like, I'm going to do it this year. This is the year. And then January 2nd, they're on the couch eating a bag of Cheetos. But you start to see when you surround yourself with driven people, you yourself rise up to that level to be with them. So I guess with coming out of that, early on, who were those people for you? Like when you're first starting out, when you're hanging around with driven people, who were those people for you?
Early on, like how early on are we talking about?
If you're like when you started your 7 years of study or maybe coming out of your 7 years of study, because you could include those people who you were hanging around with on those tapes you were listening to, right? Or is this an act? Does it have to be a physical?
No, I think that's very true, T, what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I would say that, it probably started with Tony Robbins and the Personal Power tapes. That guy was in my head every day for a long period of time. That was a change in my environment. It was, and here's another thing. There were some managers and people that I had that I looked up to that were mentors of mine. They were helping me along as I was progressively moving. But somebody who was completely outside of my environment, out of my frame of reference, that had the kind of success that I wanted. I think the first person would have been Tony.
Yeah.
It would have been him.
Yeah.
Looking at what he had and then relating to his upbringing, because he used to tell his story. I don't know if he still does. I'm sure he does, but very much in depth of what he went through his childhood, which was very, very rough. And how he, like one step at a time, created this amazing life for himself. It was definitely him. He was the first one. And then there were many, like as far as like books went,
Yes.
and really getting into people's lives and what they did and really studying them and what were the challenges that they had. So it was that. Then when I got into network marketing, it changed because now I had access to people that were actually doing it, right? So there were many little heroes in that journey also, but I got to interact with them, right? So I got to talk to people that were making $160,000 a month. And I'm like, this is the nuts, man, right here.
Right.
To be able to talk to this guy. I'm at a cocktail party. I could talk to this guy. Like I'm that close to this dude.
Sure.
It was very exciting. And I think that when you start to get close to that, there's a couple things that happen. You're excited about it, which is great, right? You get a little starstruck. But also you start to see that they're human beings. They're not any different than you or I, right? So when you relate that in your mind, I think you start to more accept the idea that you could do it. And I think that starts the drive going, right? Sure. And you hear the stories over and over again. I mean, they tell those stories about rags to riches stories. Here's where I was broke, I was homeless, that type of thing. And this came into my life and I decided to do it. And I set goals every day and I worked hard. And now I'm making $200,000 a month.
That's amazing.
So it's like, okay, I can do that.
Right.
I can do that. And that's what they sell, right? So I started off on that journey, and that, like I talk about, and like when I talked about in the podcast, what was exciting for me about that journey was that I had a vehicle that made it possible. I was working for a petroleum company that provided safety, hard work, and that was it for my whole life if I wanted to do that. I could have went that route, but it did inspire me. Like I reached the top of that very quick. There was nowhere else to go. And basically I remember one day, because I was so ambitious, I went from a truck driver to being in charge of expanding that company. The owner pulled me in the office and he said, I just want you to know you're at the top of your pay scale. No matter what you do for us, you're not going to make any more money. And my heart just went,
sure.
Like it just sunk. The drive started to go out of me. So when I came across network marketing with the promise of here's a vehicle where you can surpass anything that you've ever done before, that just lit me up, because now I knew it was up to me. And I had proven for 7 years I could work hard. Like I totally changed my work ethic. It was balls to the wall with what I was doing. So now I was really excited because now I have the work ethic. I've developed that. I have a system I can follow with the potential of being able to make a lot of money. My drive just kept going up, but the surrounding of the right people was imperative. Without those people, without Tony Robbins first, I mean, it could have been anybody, but that's who it was for me. And then progressively seeking out different people, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah, 100%.
100%.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and being a person who sat in on like network marketing pitches when I was in college, and I saw guys who were making a tremendous amount of money, and it lit me up.
Yeah.
And then you did the work. I didn't. I got into a couple and I was like, oh shit, I have to talk to people. Like this made me think about in the episode when you were talking about people want the results, but they don't want to put in the work to get there because they're dealing with their own shit.
Yeah.
They're uncomfortable. I can't ask for money. Like you're in the wrong business if that's what you're trying to do. But it just made me think of that. And I love that you can pull back and share, like, because I'm sure you're that person to a lot of people, 100%. Like you're that person to me. Like I see you as just as a regular human being. Anybody can do what you're doing, but you've been able to do it because you put in the work. And I think a lot of times people out there will say, well, it's easy for David. Like he's David Nagel. He's David freaking Nagel.
Yeah,
it's easy for him.
And you know that that's not true because you also see my weak points and where I fall down in life,
yes,
and where I've had trouble in 100%. My own life because you were around each other,
yes, totally,
all the time.
Totally.
So it's not an illusion to you. There's a realistic. Here's where he's good. Here's where he's growing.
Yeah.
Here's what he's doing. Here's where his weak points are. I'm a real human being to
yes.
you. I'm not something you put on a shelf and
yes.
say, oh, look at it,
the perfection.
So, yeah. And I think that that's important because the reality of that, at least for me, it made a huge difference for me because I saw that the person was a real person. It wasn't this, I grew up with this idea that people that were successful were not like us. They were so different, Brandon.
Sure.
They were talented. They were beautiful. They were smart. They went to school forever. They got lucky. They knew people, right? Yeah. They were very different than us.
Right.
Us little middle-class people in Chicago.
Sure.
They're very different. And then I realized they're just human beings, and many of them started off even worse than I did and made it,
Yeah.
So I think it lets the mind accept that because the truth is when it comes right down to it, what you're doing is you are changing your self-esteem. You're changing your internal image of who you are to believe that you can do it. Once you do that, then it's just a matter of doing it.
It's true.
But you got to get yourself to believe that you can. And if you keep creating this idea in your mind that success and successful people are different than you can't get there. No. Like how do I become a different person? Like right. I can't do that. This is me is based on all my fuck ups in the past. I can't be different. But then you find out that person has the same fuck ups or worse fuck ups than you, but they changed. So then it's about, okay, how do I change from that to this? And then that's what we're doing. Yeah. That's what our company is all about.
That's what we teach. Yeah, that's what you teach. I mean, the truth of it is that there's no switch. You can't just flip a switch and automatically you're going to be that thing. Even going back to the beginning of this, when we were talking about growing into the money, growing into the wealth, growing into the mindset, you have to do it over time. It's not, I don't want to bring quantum leap into this, but you can't say, okay, today I'm going to be that guy 100% of the time. Your body's not built for that. At least I'll speak to myself. My body's not built for that. I had to do this over 10 years of growth on myself. And even now I still flub up more than I don't. But the reality is that I'm growing into that. There's no magic pill. There's no magic switch. You have to but you can start today. That's the beauty of it. You can start today to realize that, okay, what is it that I really want? And this is we've talked about this on the pod before. I struggle with what is it that I want sometimes. And if you don't know what you want, then you're going to be kind of trudging along and not getting to that place where, oh, this is my desire. This is what lights me up, right? And I think a lot of people out there deal with that same stuff too.
So a couple things. Probably, and I'm going to talk about Jordan here again, just because as we do this, we wrapped up The Last Dance last night as we record this. So he is known as one of the most driven people ever, right? And even if you watch The Last Dance, if you read the book Michael Jordan, The Life by Roland Lazenby, I think it is, you see that he wasn't that way 100%. Like, he was very close. He was probably 98%, but you could also see where it crushed him when his dad died. Like, he was almost unfunctionable when his dad died. He after they won that championship, he sobbed. He was sobbing on the floor in the locker room because he missed his father so much. He couldn't share this with his father. I mean, he was a human being as anybody else. The difference was that he was able to shut it off when he had to perform. And he didn't bring it in there with him. And most people don't do that. They drag it in there with them. So he was able to shut it off and then turn it into something to succeed,
channel it,
instead of letting it destroy him, and then he doesn't have the energy to be able to do anything. So I mean, I think it's extremely revealing. And the other thing about this that I think is very important is that when a person begins to go down this road for themselves, and they get to this place where they don't know what they want, I honestly believe they are not getting enough experiences. It may be one of the top questions that I get. I don't know what I want. Well, I can't do anything for you there, right? I can show you what to do. Once you tell me what you want, I can show you how to get it. But that I don't know what I want is something that is very real for a lot of people, but it's one of two things happening. Either you're not giving yourself enough experiences to find out what you want, which is totally on you. Like, that's part of your life. You have to be able to put yourself in enough experiences to find out what you love, what your purpose is. But the other thing is that if you don't know what you want, it could be that you're not allowing yourself to want it, that it's already in your life, but you're not allowing yourself to want it because of low self-esteem, or you're worried about what other people think, or you're afraid to take the risk, and it's just easier to say, I don't know what I want, because then you don't have to make a fucking decision.
It's true.
Right? And then you stay exactly where you are. But that has nothing to do with drive, That has to do with acceptance, which I'm going to talk about on another podcast. Like, you have to really get to know who you are. That's more important than what it is am I going to do. If I can accept who I am, that'll lead to what I'm going to do.
Yes, love that. In the episode, you said focus on the commitment, not the motivation, which I thought was great. Would you mind just breaking that down for us once again? Because it really involves, do you really want to do the work? Focus on the commitment, not the motivation.
Yeah, so the reason that I picked this topic was because it is a constant, persistent question that I keep getting. It's where do you get the drive? Where do you get the motivation? Where do you get the excitement? Where do you get the enthusiasm? How do you stop procrastinating? How do I get myself to maintain the level of successful energy to actually keep doing it? So it's the way that a person is using their mind in that moment is that I need this other energy in order to get me to do something. And it doesn't work that way. That's like I don't know where that came from, but it's like some weird trick that our mind does, or we've heard it somewhere. I don't know. But the idea is that, and it's like Emerson pointed this out very clearly. And I think I had to listen to this like 50 times before I finally got it. He said, do the thing and you'll get the energy to do the thing. Troward said, getting into the spirit of it, which we've done podcasts on that before.
Correct.
So the idea is that when you step in and commit yourself to doing something, it's like the universal energy moves with you, and you start to get the energy to do it. The history is full of stories about people who were sick, exhausted, broken, wounded, like all kinds of, every logical reason in the world why they should stop. But they were so committed on doing something, they managed to pull up a different energy. Napoleon Hill said, one of the greatest days of your life is when you get introduced to your other self, the side of you that won't stop. But you don't get it unless you start to move into whatever the thing is. And it's there for each and every one of us. But I think that there's this fear about stepping into that kind of a commitment. And look, enough said. Like, nobody wants to commit to something only to find out that they fail. And I think a lot of people are afraid, I don't know if I can keep this up. I don't know if I can keep this level of commitment up. Well, maybe you can, but you're not going to know till you try. And there's no shame in you doing something and realizing, this just ain't for me, man. Like, I can't do it. I can't keep up the energy. I'm not talented enough, whatever the reason is. But you'll never know unless you step out and try. If you don't put 100% of yourself in it, like really give it the effort, the biggest, still to this day, the biggest awareness that I ever got was when I changed those 3 things about my attitude and I watched my income triple.
Yeah.
Well, it gives me goosies just to even say it, because I remember when it happened and I'm like, get the flying fuck out of here. There's no way that those 3 things caused this change in my life to happen in 30 days. It's not possible. It had to be something else. I was almost on a road of disproving that it wasn't that. Everybody was saying you got lucky and it's a good thing this person talked to you. It's a good thing you made this decision, blah, blah, blah. There were so many things against me making that decision at that time. Like it's like legend in our company. Like, I talked to my uncle and he was like, no, stay where you get the overtime. You making fun of me for wanting to be a millionaire, like all this crazy shit. The idea, the very real idea that if I took this new job, in a month, I would be laid off for 6 to 7 months with no income, right? Because I hadn't been there long enough to be able to even create unemployment from that company. I did it anyway. And everything changed. Never got laid off, nothing. And then it was like, I seriously need to find out what I did. Because how do you go from, let's see, how old was I? So I would have been 27 when that happened. So how do you go for 27 years of no breakthrough, very, very little progress? Most everything is going back to this huge quantum leap forward. And the only thing you can relate it to is 3 things that you changed in your attitude. But that attitude caused me to show up with a different energy every day. And I used to do mind tricks to like maintain the energy. I don't know if you remember this, but I told you that I had this goal. And one of the goals was to buy a boat. So when I was on the forklift, I used to imagine that I was on my boat.
Oh, wow.
And I think it kind of de-stressed me. It brought a different level of fun. I was engaging my imagination. It helped me keep my joy throughout the day. And I was very committed to, if I didn't do something good the first time, I made myself go back and do it. I can't tell you how many times I would be backing the forklift out of the trailer and go, you didn't brace that load right. Go back and do it again. And I would go back in and I would do it again. And it was like magic. Everything changed. So I have not been perfect at maintaining that, but I try. And when I don't maintain it well, I try to regroup and go back and do it again. But the thing is that it makes such a significant difference in the outcome of what comes to you, like without getting into the law of vibration. But there's a very real thing about this different level of energy that comes when you're really applying yourself to something and you're optimistic with it, and how things literally start to come with you, which I think then contributes to that drive. Because you're excited about life. You see new things, new people, new opportunities coming to you, where before it was just like somebody just put a wall up in front of my life and there's no optimism, right? I just, I'm getting very pessimistic, and maybe I should just fucking forget it and just, be happy with what I have and be satisfied, and that's it. So that's my thought on it.
That's good. Speaking of pessimism, what is that? What is pessimism the sign of? Is that just you're out of gratitude?
Yeah, I think it's you're out of gratitude, but what causes it? You're looking at what you don't have. You're forced to look at what you do have that you don't like. You start to lose your hope in life, I think, right?
Yeah.
So if you're getting up every day and you've created a life that's shit, you don't like it. right? I mean, let's just say what it is. It's shit. You're looking at it. Maybe you don't like your spouse. You don't like the fact that you had all these kids. You don't like where you're living. You don't like all this money. You feel completely trapped. If nobody teaches you how to think differently, you're going to be very pessimistic. Then you got the guy that's drinking and beating his wife and cheating on, then the dark side kicks in and you start going off and looking for other outlets because you don't know how to move through what you created. Because it is so, well, I've told you many times, I had the breakdown in the back of the trailer. Mm-hmm. I was in a psychological box that I could not see out of. How do I get outside of this box? Because none of my experience prepared me to get outside of this box. I only knew what I knew. It took a completely different change to allow me to see something different. And that was the whole thing about the energy change, was that it changed my perception, right? So I wasn't pessimistic anymore, but I forced myself to think optimistic. And I forced myself to act in love instead of hate. And I forced myself to treat people nice instead of bitching at people because I was pissed off at me. And because nobody ever really did anything to me, but I would pretend that you slighted me. So you'd be a motherfucker because...
Yeah, you created a story in your head about that person.
100%, every fucking time. So that allowed me to go from... And then again, I began to see things differently, right? The things were already there, but I couldn't see them. So but to answer that question, I think it is that when a person so psychologically surrounds themselves with what they don't like, that becomes their internal view, that they're 100%. Just pessimistic.
It's crazy because I never fashioned myself as a pessimistic person. And then as soon as quarantine hit, about week 2, I was the most unbearable mother trucker to be around. I'm telling you, I was so out of gratitude. Things were being canceled around me. I became immediately pessimistic. But then I said to myself, you know what? You've always had a little bit of pessimism. You just covered it up with over energetic optimism around people, because people would come up to me at events and be like, oh, you have such great energy. I love your aura, all this stuff. But the reality was it was an act I was putting on. So this quarantine early on got me really looking, and that sucks, shining a light on that. Let me tell you what, shining a light on yourself in that moment, being like, I got to make some changes and I got to do them quick, because I could see how people were really struggling through this whole thing. We continue to go through to this day. So that's why I asked about pessimism, because I feel like if there's anything that's going to kill a person's drive, pessimism is like the kryptonite to Superman. Like it totally, and there was several days where I was like, I didn't want to get off the couch. I just wanted to lay there. I was doing my work, but I was half-assing it. It's just crazy. I was thinking about what causes pessimism, and I think you answered it perfectly.
So because there were several days where I struggled myself, seeing those fucking 4 walls in the house every single day without any change of viewpoint. Like, this is weird because I think this just happens. Obviously, it's just happening in my head, because I don't think coming into the office really changes this viewpoint, but there's almost like a sense you can't get a bearing on, are you moving forward or not, right? So like, are we making sales? Are we progressing forward? Like, what's actually happening? And the evidence is there that yes, we are. In the beginning, it wasn't at the same speed, but it picked back up quickly, but it was still kind of like, everything's kind of closing in. It began to get a little claustrophobic there for a while.
Sure.
And I had a lot of realizations that I haven't even talked about yet, over the past couple of months. And I think a completely different level of gratitude for what we've been able to do.
Yes.
I mean, Brandon, this is the first time I've been in one place in 20 years, right? For 20 years, I've been on the road almost every other week.
It's true.
And then have to be in the house. You can't move. You can't go anywhere for 2 months, right? Or however long. It's like 10 years now, I think we've been in the house, right?
Right. Yeah, that's what it feels like.
It's fucking crazy.
And it's hard to think outside the box when you're living inside the fucking box. I mean, we have been in a box. I mean, we've been virtually on, meeting after meeting and doing all these other things and continuing to push the company forward. But at the same time, you're lacking that interaction. That's why I think this is so cool that we're back in the studio. We've been in quarantine long enough. We've slowly reacclimated to being around one another, and we're just going for it. And we're still practicing safety out there. But the reality is when you're inside of that that box, it shines a light on, and the roaches scurry like crazy.
100%.
Oh my God, it was interesting. Well, I'm sure we'll have more conversations about that as this continues on. All right, so as you closed out the episode to wind this down, there was something you said that always hits me right between the eyes, and it's looking either in the past or too far into the future. And when you do that, you sacrifice the present. So what I'd like to know, and hopefully the listeners will want to know this too, what do you personally do to stay focused on the now, like right here, right now? Because you're not much of a look back. I mean, you learn from looking back, but you don't dwell back there.
No.
And you don't look too far into the future. You are a forward thinker, but you are masterful at being here right now. How do you do that?
Well, I don't, it's not something that I generally consciously am practicing. It came from a very interesting experience. When I started the business, I was very much doing both of those things. I was looking back almost as a kind of like a fail safe. Like, I don't want to go back here. I don't want to screw this up, whatever. I was looking forward. When am I going to get there type thing? And I was very anxious in the present about what I was doing. So it was like the going in reverse was very real, very close. And going forward was not very close, right? So the back was closer. And I was over-preparing, like ridiculously over. Like, you think Steph prepares? This was nothing. It was insane what I was doing.
Sure.
And my mentor saw it. And we were getting ready for an event. And he said to me, just throw all that shit out. Like, I had come down with binders and books and, stacks of paper. And I had prepared all this stuff. He's like, look, he said, I don't know what the hell you're so worried about. He said, but you need to trust what's happening in the moment, So this was the next level of my mentorship with Bob at the time. And he's like, you need to let spirit guide you in the moment. Like, spirit will always tell you what to do in the moment if you listen, but you have to learn to listen, and you can't listen with carrying around all that shit with you. So just put it back in your room. We're not doing it. He said, just watch me. He said, just trust what's in your heart in the moment. So it took a little while. But I think one of the things I'm very grateful for was that at that time, we were actually speaking together. We were doing seminars together, which was a phenomenal experience. I learned so much doing that. But I could watch him pivot in the moment. I could watch him do what he was doing. And then he would say to me over and over again, you know the answer. Just say it. Whatever it is, say it. And I was afraid, what if I'm wrong? What if I fuck it up? He's like, then you're wrong. Then you fuck it up. Let it go and just keep. He said everything will come from the inside in that moment. He's like, what the hell are you so afraid of? Well, it was my old fear again. If I screw up, what are people going to say? Like, what's my family going to say about me? Like, I told you so. Like, I desperately did not want to experience that, right? So when I started to realize that voice was in there and it was giving me those answers in the moment, and I was able to access that all the time, it became easier and easier and easier. And I think that was like a training that I did with him for about a year. Like, we did that for about a solid year. And then after I did that, I didn't want to go back because it was like neurosis to the way that I was thinking. I was making myself nuts. Like, I don't want to screw this up. And did I do this? And to double check this? And where am I going over here? What if I don't hit it? And, it was like all this craziness that I was creating in here and then manifesting out here. I wasn't giving my best to the out here part. When I saw how much better I did in the now, just by doing that, not to say that you don't prepare, like I would prepare for what I needed to prepare for, but I didn't over prepare. I didn't become neurotic about the whole thing. There was an ease that came to that was very peaceful. And I just never went back to doing that. Since then, I will say that I have done a lot of work on letting things in my past go so that they're not constantly nagging my head. And I think the thing that keeps me from doing that is like, look, I'm a human being. I've made mistakes, right? I'm sorry for anybody that I hurt with those mistakes, but I don't regret anything in my life. People often ask me, like, if you could go back and change anything, would you? I think it's stupid to say no. Like, you can be arrogant and go, yeah, I wouldn't be where I am if I had changed something different. But I think if you really think back about a lot of things, if I could have went back and had knowledge to not make some pretty bad mistakes in my life, in order to come out better on the front, then yeah, of course, especially if I ever did anything that hurt anybody, like I didn't really want to hurt anybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So, but I do think that it allows you to stay present because it's like you're not carrying a bag of rocks on your back anymore.
Yeah.
It's like it's done. If somebody else is still living in that head from 25 years ago, then that's their issue at this point.
Yeah, you're the one that's putting yourself in your own prison with that. You're
fucking right.
Yeah.
It's why? Like why? And Bob told me one time, he said, guilt is the most unproductive emotion there is. It has no purpose. He said, everything that you've done, like I didn't like hearing this part, but he said, everything that you've done stands forever. And I'm like, I remember we were having breakfast in a restaurant when he said that to me. And I was like, I got this like creepy feeling. He's like, it stands forever.
Yeah.
He's like, you can't erase it. So just accept it. Forgive yourself and move forward. That's it.
Love it.
Done.
Yeah, no, I think anybody who's ever seen you speak knows that you come prepared, but you don't over prepare. And when you're on that stage, you feel what the room most needs, and you are driven by that.
Yeah.
Person comes up to the mic, asks you a question. They are the sole focus in that moment. But the benefit is the hundreds of other people that are there are gleaning from that information as well. I mean, we over prepare on the logistics side of things because I'm an all or nothing kind of guy, but we never have to worry about what happens between the lines when you do your thing, because you're going to take it where it needs to go. And if we have to go an additional 20 minutes into a break or a lunch break, that's what we're going to do. Like, you have an uncanny ability to just stay present and focus and help that one person that needs that in the moment. And the benefit of it is the hundreds of other people are going to follow.
Yeah. It's like the whole room goes away. When I'm focused on that person, I don't hear anybody. I don't see anybody. It's just that person.
That's amazing. It's such a skill, and you've mastered it. So, well, thanks for coming inside, David.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed that video. And if you want more videos like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel and definitely leave us a comment below, because we love to hear what you all have to say. And we know that we've got what it takes. See you on the next one.